Welcome to another edition of Mr. Bob's Builds. In today's episode, I'm going to be getting some primer down on the Faun figure. And if that wasn't exciting enough, I'm going to be talking about my airbrushes. Before we get into this, a word of warning. I took some video to go with this episode, and it's pants. This is a super little figure with some really nice detail. You may recall that I had some concerns about the mould lines that were on her left shoulder. But I'm pleased to say that cleanup was relatively straightforward. The mould lines were smoothed out with a bit of care, and a bit of green stuff was put on around the horns and at the top of the head where there were a few bubbles in the resin. And here she is, mounted on a rod and ready for paint. And here we have my airbrushes, a single action Paasche and a double action Grex. Being a clumsy so-and-so, I struggle with traditional double action top button airbrushes. The Paasche is a wonderful tool, simple to use, faultless in its operation, and very easy to clean. And while being single action, it might not be quite as good in a graphic artist's hands, just about perfect for my needs when it comes to things like priming and base coating. Where the Grex comes into its own is when a variety of finishes is required in a small area or in a small amount of time, and particularly for fine detail work. In the case of this particular exercise, the Paasche will be used to lay down the black primer, and the Grex will be used to lay down the white top coat, the highlight coat, where a bit more finesse is required. But it should be noted that the Paasche would have been fully able to do that too. I'll talk about the operation of these two brushes as we go along. Right, just about ready to start priming. This is my setup. I've got a bowl on the right there, which is to chuck kitchen towels in. I've got a spray pot to get rid of waste, paint and cleaner. I've got my Vallejo black primer, which has been well shaken. I've got a face mask. I'm going to be doing a lot of spraying this morning, so the face mask is obligatory. A couple of disposable gloves, the figure of course, and the airbrush. I'm using the half-ounce paint pot with that, which I'm going to half fill with paint, so I don't have to change out the paint halfway through. And here we see the Paasche ready for action. The paint is fed from the bottom, and the air comes in from the top. The two get mixed at the very tip. Air pressure is set at the compressor, and the button on the top is pressed down and air comes out. The flow of paint is controlled by turning the knob just below the end of the brush. Paint flow is increased by turning that knob clockwise and decreased by turning it anti-clockwise. When fully closed, only air comes out, no paint. The next shot shows a very light first coat of primer going on, but the video really is very poor, so it's very short, but you get the drift. And here she is, primed up and ready for highlights. Now we come to doing the white part of the two-part priming process. This provides the highlights. For this I'm going to be using my Grex airbrush. It's a double action airbrush, and unlike traditional double action brushes, this is a trigger action, but the two actions are just the same. A little bit of pressure for air and then a continuing pressure for paint. So if I just pull the trigger back, I won't put it back too far because there's paint in the brush. And that gives you your air, and you feel a slight pressure, and you know that any more pressure on that trigger, your paint's going to come. Just a few bits to show this brush in action. I couldn't really rescue much from the realm of the pant. It's a double action brush, much like any other double action brush. Paint is mixed by gravity from the cup at the top of the brush and mixes with air around the needle. The first pull on the trigger produces air and air alone. Then increasing the pressure, you get more and more paint coming out from a fine line to a broad stroke. Personally speaking, I find this far more intuitive than the traditional top button double action brush. As always, your mileage may vary. On this one will go. And now a very short video of this brush in highlighting action. And here she is in all her primed and highlighted glory. I hope that you'll agree that the process I've followed has brought out the fantastic detail on this figure. The challenge now, of course, is to do justice to her. And I hope that you'll come back soon to see how I'm getting on with my airbrush, my paintbrush and my paint. Well, that's it. Goodbye for now. Thank you for looking. Come back soon.